Howdy folks, it's me, Josh. And big surprise, I like to create alternate history scenarios. And after doing this for a few years at this point, I've learned a lot about what alternate history really is and why we're all so interested by it. A couple weeks ago, I put out a video critiquing the channel Possible History, both for his insults against me and others, as well as how he puts YouTube clout before genuine history and alternate history. Now, I've gotten a lot of responses to that video. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. But many of these responses, some of which I'll be responding to in this video, have a fundamental misunderstanding of what alternate history is, what it does, and what it's capable of. And actually, I would even go so far as to say that alternate history is, in fact, one of the most useful tools we have for understanding and sharing the subject of history, especially when it comes to the online world. But then again, that tool can also come at a dangerous cost. So why do I say that? What do these people get wrong? And why is alternate history so important? Let's get into it. Alternate history, in the most basic way I can put it, is the theorization of what would have happened if something, or things, had gone differently. Now, of course, this is very broad, and can be used from small-scale personal events to massive world-changing phenomena. And this is for a reason. Man has had the natural urge to hypothesize about if events had gone differently ever since time can remember. It's part of our natural sense of curiosity to imagine how our lives or our world could be changed depending on if things had gone slightly differently. And I'm sure we can all think of times in which we've wondered about how our lives would have gone differently if certain events had changed. And so, when people theorize about these things, it results in the creation of scenarios, a set of effects that result from the initial change that was made and the answer to the original what-if question. For example, if someone were to theorize on what would have happened if, say, the South had won the Civil War, they would tell of how the effects of the South winning the war would alter the world, which ends up becoming their scenario and their answer to that original question. Now, people aren't just naturally curious, but are also naturally social as well. So, when people come up with such scenarios, they often like to share them with people, and that's how you get people like me and many others, both on and off of this platform, who enjoy sharing these scenarios with others. But this can lead to two different mindsets while creating alternate histories. On the one hand, there are those that prioritize the creation, doing their best to find the genuine, most accurate and plausible scenario. But then, there are those that prioritize the sharing, telling people what they want to hear instead of genuinely trying to provide the most accurate scenario. One of the responses that I got to that video on Possible History was that there was supposedly no such thing as a genuinely accurate scenario. And though, sure, there's no such thing as a 100% perfect alternate history, this is in much the same way as how there's no such thing as a 100% perfect weather forecast. The weatherman might be wrong sometimes, but it's one thing to call rain showers a bit earlier than they happen, and another to just tell people it'll always be sunny just because that's what they want to hear. You can't know the answer for sure, but you can try to give the best guess you possibly can. In much the same way, there's a big difference between sharing an attempt to find the most accurate answer to the question and creating a scenario that's purely meant to please or entertain people. If someone were to create a scenario on if the South had won the Civil War and came to the conclusion that, after victory, the South would industrialize before invading and conquering the North in order to impose slavery upon them under, say, a fascist government, this would, quite obviously, be absolutely absurd given the historical context. And though such a scenario may entertain an audience, it completely neglects the historical aims of the South, which was to protect its agrarian economy, limited decentralized government, and the institution of slavery for itself. The alternate history scenarios we consume affect the way we view our history and our world as a whole. And this is because it directly tries to explain to us the effects and impact that historical events have had on our history by showing us what would have happened otherwise had things taken a different turn. Let's go back to our example on if the South had won the Civil War. When you consume a scenario on this topic, it gives you a sense of the weight and the importance of the outcome of the Civil War. And depending on what this scenario speculates on what would have happened, this will affect the way you view the stakes of the Civil War, giving you a sense of perspective on what actually happened by looking at it from the basis of what could have happened. But what happens when a scenario prioritizes entertaining the audience over offering perspective on historical events? When this happens, the scenario ends up detaching itself from its historical basis as it stops being alternate history and ends up becoming artificial history. This artificial history, though it can be fine in small doses, can end up becoming extremely dangerous to our understanding and perspective on history when there's an overabundance of it, as it can end up leaving you with a warped perspective on historical events. Remember the inaccurate scenario we came up with earlier in this video on if the South won the Civil War? Well, because that scenario doesn't attempt to provide an accurate look into this alternate timeline, it would leave the audience with a warped understanding of what the real stakes of the Civil War were, greatly damaging their understanding and perspective on the conflict. And not only does artificial history damage people's understanding of historical events, but when overexposed to it, it also damages people's understanding of what alternate history even is. Alternate history is an incredible tool that can be used to gain perspective on historical events. But when it's abused purely for entertainment, it no longer deserves to call itself history of any kind, as it just becomes pure fiction. And when overexposed to this type of history, that's all people will ever see alternate history as. In the video I made about possible history, I went over how he's shown to prioritize YouTube clout, views, and entertainment over genuine history and alternate history, as his content clearly falls into the category of artificial history, caring more about the sharing of the scenario than its creation. And as a result, when his viewers swarmed to my video to respond and voice their outrage, the things that they said show that, because they've been given so many of these crowd-pleasing scenarios, their understanding of these things were skewed, of no fault of their own. In the way that YouTube works, videos that entertain people are shared vastly more than those meant to inform people. So, as a result, this harmful artificial history gets shared widely across YouTube, with many people falling victim to it as their understanding of history is warped by those merely seeking to gain views or to entertain an audience. Now, I'm not saying that alternate history can't be entertaining. It is fun to watch and to think about, and that is an important aspect of it. But though alternate history is absolutely meant to be entertaining, that entertainment isn't its primary purpose, but rather a byproduct of genuine historical speculation. The problem, though, arises when the priority is shifted from the history to the entertainment, as it ends up completely detached from history, instead just being entertainment disguising itself as history. This is why I find it so important that anything seriously attaching history to its name be taken seriously by people. And it's why I warn people of those like Possible History, whose artificial histories will end up damaging their understanding, not just of historical events, but of alternate history as a whole. So, what's the solution here? Though it's not possible to change how YouTube or its algorithm works, we can change how we approach these scenarios. We can think, is this scenario trying to widen my understanding and perspective of history, or is it only trying to entertain me? And sometimes this is hard to spot. Many artificial histories are very cleverly disguised. But I implore you, don't let yourself be misled by those who don't care about history. And possible history, because I know you're watching, you know that this is true. And you can't lie to your viewers forever. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to stick around for more. And hey, you could also, maybe, subscribe or something. So that's it for today's video. Well, till next time, see ya.